Welcome everybody to this edition of O365Eh. And tonight we're going to be talking about Microsoft 365 Copilot. We're going to do a quick overview and a roundtable on the different workloads in Microsoft 365 that are enabled for Copilot. So I won't go on an in-depth introduction about Microsoft Copilot. You've probably already heard about it. In a nutshell, it leverages machine learning models to do personalized recommendations and suggestions, such as writing emails, creating presentations, managing tasks in all the various Microsoft 365 workloads like Outlook, PowerPoint, Excel, Microsoft Teams. And you've probably heard about these things in AI called large language models like OpenAI's ChatGPT. So Copilot leverages these large language models to interpret what you need. And then what's really unique about the Microsoft Copilot AI is it then uses your Microsoft graph, so your data in Microsoft 365, things like emails, chats, meetings, calendar, to make personalized recommendations and help you take actions and work more productively. So I urge you to do some searching and researching on Copilot to find out more. What we're going to do, though, is dive into each of those Microsoft 365 workloads and look at how it leverages Copilot, as Microsoft likes to say, to work in a better, more effective way, and to collaborate more effectively with people in your organization. So with that, Dino, why don't we take a look at Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel? How are we going to leverage Copilot to work more productively?
Yeah, thanks, Kurt. So starting off with Copilot and Word, I mean, I think, and this will be the theme for both of them, is really content creation. So, you know, with Copilot in Word, you'll be able to write, edit, summarize, and create content right along with you. So imagine just being able to interact with Copilot in Word and just by giving it a few brief commands, actually creating a lot of content for you. So you can, for example, ask it to create content based on some files or maybe a directory of files or some things you stored into OneDrive. Summarize some of that, rewrite some of the sections of text that you maybe you've already written yourself, but you want a different feel for it. Perhaps it was written in a casual way and you want it to be more professional. So you could say, hey, Copilot, rewrite this for me in a more professional tone. You know, and so a lot of interesting and great use cases for this. Perhaps English isn't your first language, is the first one I can think of, and you may have a lot of the great deal of content you have, but it's probably not formatted right. So you could use Copilot to help you do that, something that you would have had to get someone else in the past to do. So you can see from the animated GIF playing here, you can ask it things like draft a 2-page project proposal based on the data from, you know, this document or a spreadsheet that I might have in OneDrive. You could then say, well, go make the third paragraph more concise. Again, we talked about changing the tone of a document from casual to professional, for example. And then finally, you know, saying, well, afterwards, create a 1-page draft off this, based off this outline. So lots of great opportunity to build new content. You know, for me, I probably would use this to create project documentation, for example, where I just might say, hey, Copilot, look in this OneDrive folder and grab all this documentation and write a project document for me in a professional manner, and see if it would make my ability to do documentation easier. That would be probably my first way of interacting with it. I'm not sure if you guys have any examples of how you might want to use it, but nobody likes writing documentation, so that would be mine.
Yeah, I think it's getting over that hurdle of the start, right? Like you look at a blank document for a while, and then once you get in the motion, then it's a little bit easier. But like hey, I have to create a recommendation report or a statement of work, and you can base that on some of your notes and previous documents that you've written, similar topic, or some of your discovery items, and then kind of pull that in as a starting point. You know, get get the momentum going. I think that's my biggest, is like the writer block to start, and then once I get kind of past that, then it's usually pretty good.
Yeah, that's good.
Michael stole my thunder. That would be my definite biggest use case, is just getting started. And you can get started by summarizing existing pieces of work, either PowerPoint presentations or blog articles or something internal, other documents, and just ask it to summarize the top 5 points, top 10 points. And you can use that as a framework to get started. And as you guys just said, getting started is the hardest part. So I think it'll be really useful for that.
Nice. Yeah, so moving on to Copilot in Excel, it's a similar thing. Again, still that idea of content creation, although often with Excel, or generally with Excel, you've got a bunch of data that you're starting with. So now you've got that, you don't have that issue starting, but sometimes you may not know what formulas to use to format the data for you. So you can ask Copilot about data in a natural way. So I might just have a ton of data. I'm not really sure how to slice and dice it. So I could get Copilot to, give a breakdown of say, I'm looking at a bunch of sales data. So give a breakdown of that sales data and maybe insert a table to summarize that sales data. And then do things like projecting the impact of changing something, a variable maybe in that data. Like, if I do this, what will happen? And it'll actually give you projected impacts, possible projected impacts. Maybe ask Copilot to do some modeling. If you change the growth rate for a particular sales item that you're looking at, and how that might impact your gross margin. So, again, you might, instead of spending time worrying about formulas, now you can interact more naturally with your data and move past some of that stuff. So instead of spending time trying to research how to do something, you can actually just ask it in a natural way and get those results. And I'm kind of already doing this in a roundabout way. Of course, this isn't available yet, but I can just open up, Bing Chat if you've signed up for the preview, which uses ChatGPT. And I had a large set of customer data given to me, and the phone numbers weren't, like, honestly 10 different formats. So some had just 10 digits, some had dashes, some had +1, some didn't have one, all sorts of different formats. So more of as an experiment too, I said to Bing Chat, write me a formula that takes data, and I gave it a few examples of the data I had, and I said, convert this to, E164 format, and it gave me the long substitute command. I swear it was probably this long, an Excel formula, and it was straight away right. And it would have taken me probably an hour to get that formula perfect. But it just did that for me. So that's probably a great example, is just the amount of time I'm going to spend worrying about the syntax of a command versus just getting things done.
I would agree. I think the formula part for me is going to be the game changer, right? Not having to look it up, or how do I convert this, and you get like these weird error messages that you're not really understanding. You end up having like a space in the tail end or whatever. I think that's sort of the areas that would definitely help. And then in addition, obviously the things that you mentioned before, being able to just understand your data, right? At a easier way to model it.
Yeah, and you're supposed to, once this is available to everybody, be able to ask things about your data, like show me the last sales trends for the last 5 years, which doing in Excel, if you've ever tried it, isn't trivial. You have to understand which data series to put on which axes. It'll be really interesting to see just how well it nails that use case without having to pre-configure anything. That's what I'm really excited to try out.
Yeah, and of course, I think the thing that's really important is, before it actually changes any of your data, it's going to tell you things like, here's what I found. And I know for me, I'm really protective about my Excel spreadsheets. I don't want anything to break, so I think people, it's important to articulate that before anything's fully changed. It'll indicate, okay, specifically, here's what I'm going to do. So that's that's very promising as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't do a lot of data analysis in Excel. Like a lot of my work is, like you said, massaging data from different ways it's been entered, or different systems that's been exported. So hey, there's new features in Excel like XLOOKUP and data types, and I build out some cool ways to use that. But then it's like remembering how you used it 6 months ago, and so being able to just talk to it and be like, hey, I just need to create a formula based on these conditions. I don't need to remember if it's a if condition or all the different scenarios I need to kind of check for. I can just tell it what I want, and then it'll generate the formula, the long string, without me having to do a lot of pre-work on every function to remember, okay, what are the different variables in the order, and kind of go through that way. So I think this, it's already a game changer for using ChatGPT and the Bing chat to kind of solve a lot of that. I think the business side of analysis and being able to like, hey, ask forecasts, and if we sold this product a little bit more or focused on it, how can we change our numbers? I think that's gonna be huge, but it's not my use case.
So let's pass it over to Hab to talk about PowerPoint and Outlook.
Yeah, thanks, Dino. So next up is Outlook. I think obviously, a lot of users live inside their email as well. Being able to, generate, emails, that are professional about certain topics or what have you, I think is really good. How many times also have you been, sent these forwards or on a reply all thread, and you haven't really been paid attention, or you come back from holiday and you sort of got to work your way back up from the bottom to the top, and it's Copilot will be able to provide the ability to summarize all that, right? Say like, hey, give me all the or summarize all the emails that I missed while I was out, right? And maybe flag important things along the way. Draft responses, can even, maybe understand, people's viewpoints and sort of their tone in the sense of how they're typing. So you kind of understand, how they're feeling and reacting, when they're writing up those messages. So I think those are some really cool things that, you'll be able to do with inside Copilot, or Outlook, I guess, for Copilot.
Yeah, and I know a couple of people who have taken long email threads today, cut and paste them into OpenAI's version of ChatGPT to generate a summary. That's essentially that function. I'm not saying people should do that, but once this functionality is in Outlook, you can see how that could be really useful. Just summarize this long email thread.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good segue into be careful of your corporate data, right? Like, Copilot is going to be part of your M365 subscription, is going to be part of your compliance boundaries, your what you have access to and what you shouldn't have access to will be restricted. But some of the OpenAI and kind of public services, if you're pasting corporate data into that could be influencing the model and stuff like that. So you have to be really careful with data there. On the Outlook side, I struggle with calendar management. I have multiple calendars, so be able to say like, hey, look at all my meetings that are booked in this calendar and add them to this other calendar, or hey, emails from senders that I've never responded to, or organizations that I've never kind of interacted with, maybe put that into a different folder, or those that look like cold call type emails, maybe get those out of my way, or hey, this long thread, focus on the bullet points that are relevant to the areas that I'm focusing on, and maybe the other thread that everyone's been replying all that stuff, I can kind of weigh out that noise. So I think, definitely Outlook tied to Copilot within your compliance boundary could be pretty powerful.
Yeah, that's good. It's good point, Michael. And just since we're talking about the privacy and compliance, we were going to end talking about that, but we'll just say that one of the things I really like about the Microsoft Copilot approach and the Microsoft approach to AI from an enterprise corporate perspective, they're very clear that you own your data. So anything that you supply to Copilot won't be used to train any publicly available large language model. So just get that out of the way. It was a good segue.
Yeah, so I'm going to move over to PowerPoint. So I think this, I think it sort of goes back to, some of the other topics, even, like what Dina was mentioning, or you guys were saying, like, where's the starting point, right? When, as MVPs, we do a lot of presentations, both, internally, for organizations and publicly, where do I start out, building a presentation, skeleton and stuff like that. So, I think this is going to be really good. I know that Microsoft, I think a while back had they were building something kind of like that inside of PowerPoint, where it's like, create a presentation based on this, and it would try and go out and get that information. But I don't know if that actually went public. I'm not sure if it actually went public with it. But I mean, with this, it's going to be great, create a presentation or a 5-slide presentation, based on this document with stock photos and stuff like that. Or, let's say you have a long presentation, you can say maybe summarize, this 35, page PowerPoint presentation into like maybe a 5-slide or a 3-slide, or reformat certain things, maybe some bullet points with an image or something like that. I think that's going to be really good to provide, or build some really good, sharp, concise presentations from a PowerPoint perspective.
I think PowerPoint's a little bit different in the sense that there's so much functionality in PowerPoint that people like scrape maybe 2-3% of the functionality. So something like Copilot here could, expose like ways of using animations and all these features easily without having to actually know how to do that. So I think there's a lot of value of like saying, hey, I want to do these slide transitions in this way, and maybe I want an index slide that connects to all the other slides, and do some pretty cool things where it would take you, a lot of time to kind of research how you do that, get some samples and build them up.
I think with PowerPoint too, it'll be one of the workloads where people can use a little bit of creativity. You can ask for things like create or find me a meme that illustrates X, Y, or Z, or, a good anecdote to explain something from a product perspective or from a marketing pitch. And with
even
all the
speaker notes, right? Like, hey, summarize this slide with 3 bullets or something like that, so I could talk to or something. Yeah.
I use PowerPoint when I'm doing customer workshops, and I just find it easier to use it to gather data, and I'm typing in it while I'm presenting, and just so that they can see it and provide feedback. So, but often it means it's not very clean. So I'm looking forward to being able to say, look, take my notes and clean them up, make them look a bit more professional, or summarize every workshop that I did. So I usually title the workshops and give dates. So there's a lot of good data already there, and I'm looking forward to using it in that way.
I'm looking forward to borrowing them. Okay, so with that, I'll pass it over to Michael to talk about Microsoft Teams.
Yes, Copilot in Teams is coming in a few different variations. So what we're showing kind of in the image here is business chat. So this is a new experience where it's actually bringing all your different areas from different sources into one place to kind of use your learning model or your language model over top of that. So that could be chat conversations, documents, email, calendar, notes, and contacts. So I think this is going to be like the hub of all that data and how you interact with it from a kind of a Copilot point of view. And so now you can ask it things like, hey, you know what, I want to summarize, a bunch of summarize all this information for customer X on this specific project. And now I can pull from all those different sources. Or, hey, we're trying to make sure that we're on budget or on our project timelines or a project plan. What are our next milestones? Which milestones are done? What are outstanding items? What are items to flag? So I think there's a lot of power when you start putting this kind of over top of it. I mean, you think of it, it's like almost like the Bing chat across kind of all the different internet sources. When you're searching, this is now your data that you have access to within your tenant in a compliant way. And then the other one is, the big one that's been kind of shown is, Copilot in meetings and conversations. So, my day is filled with back-to-back meetings. So the nirvana of like being able to have effective meetings, not just having, hey, an agenda, that's a huge leap as it is to get people to have an agenda in a meeting, but like, hey, organizing key discussion points, action items. I do a lot of presentations where, I'm talking through content, I'm explaining things, or maybe I'm evaluating a customer's environment. And I'm like, okay, you need to, make these changes, and, I'm presenting at the same time. So I'm not usually making the best notes. So, being able to summarize all the key items that we talked about, all the action items that are on, the customer or myself, and really kind of, using that information that's happening instead of, kind of going stale. Other scenarios are like, hey, you come into the meeting late, you can ask, hey, what are the topics that have already been discussed? You can ask it things like, hey, based on the attendees or the conversation, what items are of focus or what are of interest, what are items that maybe are not of interest. So it'll be interesting to see how people use this after a meeting as well as live during a meeting.
Yeah, the meeting, if you miss a meeting, the meeting summary will be a game changer for a lot of people. I think you're double or triple booked. Now you just go back and say, summarize the meeting. Was there any to-dos for me? Was I mentioned? And that's just going to come front and center. I think that's going to be amazing.
I'm not sure whether you mentioned this, Michael, too, but at Build recently, they announced that messaging extensions will, if you have one today, it'll automatically serve as a Copilot plugin. So message extension can reach out to that app, and you get the large language model capabilities to understand your intent or to take actions on your behalf. I think that'll be really powerful too.
Yeah, like, hey, create a bunch of Jira tickets for all the change requests that we need based on the meeting we just had on the network assessment review or something like that. Like, hey, we have to do a firewall rule change, network internet upgrade or something like that. Like, I could see, tying these additional systems that are, in the team's kind of app store ecosystem.
I think that's the utopia, but it's starting to look like we're getting close, right? So.
Yeah, I think summarizing, for me, like if you're away, or if you're in multi-tenants, you know what I mean, and you come into attendance, it's like, okay, tell me what I missed. So you don't have to go through all the different activity feed, message, that are bold that you're missed kind of thing, or even highlighted in the Teams channels, right? I think that's going to be huge.
All right, so I think that's it for Teams. One last one we wanted to talk about was Power BI, right? So a huge announcement at Microsoft Build was something called Microsoft Fabric. And to understand what this is and how Power BI relates to it, I'll just give you an overview of a project I've been working on for over a year and a half. It involved, like almost every other data project, ingesting data from multiple data sources. So you have the ingestion, storing that data, and we use Azure Data Explorer for that. And once the data is in a quote data lake or a common data storage, you typically have to do some ETL on the data. You have to normalize it, filter it, convert it, do some measurements on it. And then we use Power BI for the visualization. So there's two layers in Power BI. One's called Power Query, and that's almost like a mini data warehouse layer where you can transform the data, join it, model it. And then, of course, in Power BI, you have the data model, which you can build your visualizations on it. So at Build, they announced this thing called Microsoft Fabric. And basically, each one of those components I just described is all built into one offering called Microsoft Fabric. So on the ingestion side, you have Data Factory, which can be used to do the data ingestion, all your data pipelines. It's the data warehousing is done by Synapse Data Warehouse. So that's all incorporated, integrated. You also have some Synapse features and functionalities that I'm not familiar with, but they have the real-time analytics and the Synapse data science capabilities built into it. And very significant, there's its own data storage layer called OneLake. And what they're doing there is they call it like OneDrive for your data. So whatever data is stored in your data project, it's available to all the services in your project. And it uses a open source format called Parquet, which is very performant and very well understood by all these different pieces. Now, with Power BI, it's also integrated into Microsoft Fabric. So it's not like a separate thing off to the side where you model your data outside of all the other pieces. Power BI is integrated right into Fabric, and it can use the data model in your data warehouse. So if you're considering any data project, it always has one or two or three of those pieces that I just described. Having it all rolled up into one is really, really powerful, and it should streamline your data projects. Yeah, so also, you know, on the Power BI front too, just having used it a lot in the last couple of years, just using Copilot with Power BI to understand your data better, much like the Excel use cases we discussed, I think is going to be really powerful too. Guys, any comments about the Power BI features?
I mean, I don't know about the whole one data lake or whatever. Like that's well beyond my realm, but like, you know, similar to Excel, right? Like asking it to, you know, I play a little bit in Power BI, and you know, I'm always like struggling with like massaging the data and transforming it. So on the Power Query, asking it formulas, how do I get the data in this format, or maybe even change, you know, a date timestamp to a right time zone or something like that. But then the visuals, right? Like, hey, what is the best visualization for this table or these certain questions? I see it more from an author kind of point of view, but like from an organization, having, you know, all this data in one place and asking it questions and different ways to visualize that data is pretty huge.
Yeah, for sure. And I forgot one really important thing, huge advantage of Microsoft Fabric is on the data governance side, whatever governance rules you put into place, it does end-to-end governance across the entire fabric. So let's say you have a rule about PII. You know, before Microsoft Fabric, you'd have to implement that PII rule to catch the violation in various data sources or at various layers of your data stack. This, you define it once and it applies to all data in the OneLake data repository, which was really useful. And in this day and age of governance and compliance and security, I think that's going to be more important to organizations. So with that, let's do a wrap up. I'll bet you everybody's asking about availability and pricing. So Copilot is not publicly available today. I don't think they've announced official GA or even public preview date. It's currently being tested with 20 commercial customers. And I think at Build, they just announced that they were expanding that early access program to an initial wave of 600 enterprise customers. So they're definitely starting to validate and roll this technology out. In terms of licensing and pricing, there's been nothing announced. It's looking like it won't be included all up in the existing Microsoft 365 subscriptions, possibly another add-on, but that's a speculation. Nobody knows. And people are probably asking themselves about privacy and security. As we mentioned before, Microsoft is very clear that you own your data. So any data that you have or that you give Copilot, it'll never be used to train language models that are available to anybody else. And also it's important to note that your use of Copilot uses only your data in Microsoft Graph. So just the data you have access to. And Microsoft is also very clear that right now Copilot is under the same privacy and security terms and conditions that other Microsoft Azure services that you consume. So which is really great because Microsoft, I think, does a lot of good stuff in terms of privacy and security, and they've researched this area very well, and their terms and conditions are very clear about that. So with that, any comments, guys, about privacy, security, availability, or pricing?
As soon as we can get our hands on it, I wanna use it in my day-to-day. But yeah, just waiting idle until that early adoption or whatever expands to more orgs.
Definitely. All right, well, we'll leave it at that. Thanks, everybody. Hope that was useful, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you.
Yep.